Welcome back to Rad JBI. I'm JB. In this video, I'm going to show you some of the key steps in installing our JBI suspension Kawasaki KX450 shock DIY kit. This video isn't going to encompass a step-by-step process of how to take apart the shock and reassemble it. Reason being, shocks are a lot more sensitive and they don't have nearly as much room for error or mistakes when it comes to properly servicing, modifying, and revalving a rear shock. So with that in mind, what I'm getting at is if you don't have a very strong understanding and experience how to rebuild and revalve a shock, then this is not a kit to learn how to do that. Instead, the key takeaway from this video is showing you the key steps in installing the parts that we're going to provide you with for our DIY kit. So with that in mind, let's get right into it, guys. In front of me, I have a 2024 Kawasaki KX450 Showa shock. And then over here is I have the components that come inside of our DIY kit for that shock. Awesome. So you see the shock is already disassembled. And here's the parts we're going to provide you with. And we're going to go through step by step with what you're giving you and why. And most importantly, what you can expect as a rider once you get to try out your new JBI suspension on your bike. The first piece we provide you with, and you're going to want to start with, is our JBI black bumper. That is this piece right here. And that is going to replace your OEM bumper. This one has about 20 hours of ride time on it, not a lot. As you can see, it's already started to discolor quite a bit. That's not really a bad thing, but it's gotten a lot drier and harder than from when it was brand new. Our bumpers that are the same PUR foam material, so again, what it's made out of, we add a small amount of rubber material to our bumpers. It turns the bumper black. It also prevents the bumper from absorbing moisture as quickly, and it also gives it better UV sun protection, so it doesn't dry out and get hard like this one. After you got that installed, we're going to start with our shock bumper cap. That's going to go right on here. And then next, we're going to focus on your seal head assembly. The items we're going to provide you with this kit will be a new shock seal, and also the O-ring on the outside as well. These are both very key to the shock sealing. I've already gone ahead and rebuilt this one with a new seal and a new O-ring just to save us some time for this video. Now, as you guys will know, that due suspension, you probably already have one of these, but a nice shock bullet tool. So that way we can install this on there safely. Cool, so now we're getting to the good stuff. We have our shock shaft assembly. I'm going to actually throw it in our vise over here. So the next steps we're going to work on is we're going to be putting the valving on here that we provided you with, and also the main piston back on as well. So if you want to take a look, you'll see I have these components already laid out. What I've done is I've already removed the OEM valving. So what I have here are the components we're going to keep from the OEM valving. So the first part we're going to start with is our pop-out spring washer. It's just another shim, but please keep this. You see it probably has some rub marks on it and stuff. That's totally natural. You can wipe it off with a rag. When it comes to valving, I like compressed air because it gets off any really small particles and fine grit you can't see. So let's go with the side that already have the marks on it down, because again, that is what your top-out spring is hitting against. I think it's a little redundant because we're going to keep using the steel washer that's underneath it. The spring could hit that as well, but we're going to maintain it in the same stock configuration. So again, compressed air works great. This is non-directional. You can install this either way. I'm going to put it back down how it was. Awesome. So the compression shim stack comes next. All right, so next up is our compression shim stack. And we have already removed the original one and thrown that in the trash. What you'll get from us is a complete new shim stack that is custom built specific to the information that you provide us with. This is our compression one. We got everything zip tied together. I'm going to grab a pair of dikes to cut off the zip tie. It's my favorite word for a tool. Awesome. So we got our zip tie off. Now we're going to have these clean and washed, but still it's always good practice is to blow them off with some compressed air before you put it on as well. I'm going to put this on our little shim holder that we have. That way everything stays in order, and just give it a little blasty blast. Cool. Again, we will already have them cleaned and aired off for you, but it's a good extra step to take. Because as I said earlier, shocks are not nearly as forgiving when it comes to proper assembly and modifications. So we have that correct. You can come take a look at it. A lot of paper planes going ahead over us today. I wish they were MIA and not here. If you know music, you'll catch that reference. Next is our shock piston. We're gonna maintain using the stock shock Showa piston. Why? Because this is the same piston you'd find inside of a Showa A-kit shock. So there's really not much performance on the table to modifying this and making the shock work better overall. You can certainly modify it, but whatever you achieve in one area, let's say comfort, you're probably gonna lose in bottoming. So as this piston sits, it works very well on a nice range of setups. So it's not something we're gonna change. We are gonna remove this band and put a low friction one on, but I find it easier to remove the band once this piston is reassembled to our shock shaft. Again, what's our next step? Compressed air. We will surface pistons if the pistons have a lot of wear on them, but a lot of pistons are new and they're actually dished a little bit. So if you have a new shock with minimal time on it, please don't service the piston. If you have a shock with a good amount of time, by that I mean 60 hours or more on it, and you see a very uneven wear pattern on it, then please surface that piston. So again, a lot of this you already know, but we're gonna do compression side down. Next is our rebound stack. The OEM rebound stack has already been removed and thrown away. Next, we have our JBI rebound stack. Again, these are custom built based on the information that you provide us with. The secret to rebound shim stacks is pretty much matching the spring rate you're going to utilize. Meaning, whatever spring rate you have, you need a rebound stack tied to that. And can you guess what next? Cool, so now it's time to put this onto our shaft assembly. We're going to grab the spacer that was directly underneath our OEM nut. We're going to keep maintaining use of that. This is directional. There is a very flat side with a sharp edge, and then a side that's more rounded with a rounded edge. We want the side that's been flattened very well to go down there. Perfect. Now, when we give you these shim setups, they're always going to match the amount of threads you have left, but it's still good practice to verify that when you put this nut on, it utilizes all the threads and it clamps down the assembly, meaning once we tighten this nut, these won't spin. It's fixed in place. So now that we got everything on there, we're going to put some Loctite on our nut, which we're going to provide you guys with some new ones. Those haven't arrived yet, so for this video, I'm just going to reuse this one, but we will give you a new one. Here at the shop, we have orange Loctite. They advertise it as the strength of red, but doesn't require heat for removability. So that's quite nice. Cool, we got a nice film of Loctite inside of our nut. And we're gonna torque this down to 20 foot-pounds. This is an M12 thread, but it is also a hollow M12 thread. It's not a standard M12 bolt that isn't hollow. So because of that, we're not gonna go crazy on the torque spec. Also, we have Loctite on our side as well, holding that together. So we got this preset at 20. Now, when you're tightening this down, if you hear any crunching noise, that's gonna tell you that you have dirt or debris somewhere in your valve stack or in your piston. So listen carefully for that. We don't hear any of that now because as you saw, we cleaned off everything before we assembled it. Awesome, so there's our alarm letting us know. So this is done and we're about halfway there with our assembly. All right, so now that we got this shim stack assembly on here, please let your Loctite cure at least 6 hours before assembling the shock. Yes, Loctite does cure quite a bit faster than that, within like 15 minutes to an hour, but the longer time you give it to cure, the stronger of a bond it's gonna hold, and that's very important. We've never had a shock come apart on us at Ride JBI. Not saying that'll never happen, hopefully it never does happen, but take every step and possibility you can to ensure that your shock assembly is the best it can be. And one of those steps is allowing Loctite to properly cure. So now that I have lectured you on that, let's go to the other parts of this. So here is our compression adjuster, which we have already removed from our shock housing. we are going to move the compression piston assembly here that also has some shims and replace it with our JBI titanium compression assembly that we've already built complete with shims. Again, the shim stack will be custom built depending on the information that you provide us. The main differentiator between these is the gold piston is the A-kit style piston. So if you took apart a Showa A-kit shock, you would find a piston that looks much more similar to this than the silver one. There's not a huge difference between the two, but there are some notable differences that are definitely important and something we wanted to utilize in this. So I'll show you how to remove this one to put this one in here. We're going to utilize these flat edges right here to clamp that inside of our little vise over here. Awesome. And then we're going to provide you with a shim just like this one. It's a very thin one and we bent it a little bit. Reason being is we need to get out a circlip in here. So we bent this to match the radius of this part and to get behind this circlip. Now this is spring loaded a little bit. So I'm going to push it down with a tool and use my other hand to get it out. I like to use this little screwdriver. Push down in the center. And then here's our shim. And we're going to get right behind this circlip. Now this is much easier said than done. And it sure helps to have an extra set of hands, meaning one person pushing down on the tool, but you can do it. Beautiful. So there's our circlip we're going to hold on to. And now let's remove this piston assembly. So this part of your shock absorber is just like the base valve compression adjuster on your forks. So that's why we're modifying this, because to modify this is to like ignore half of the shock, and that's not good. We want to do a full comprehensive revalve at Ride JBI, just like we do on your forks as well. So instead of asking you guys to remove the peen right here and adjust this valving and only have a small amount of threads to utilize, we figured it'd just be much easier to give you the entire assembly, and even at that, to give you the better designed piston than the stock one. We'll make a separate video that kind of details our JBI piston. Really, we'll do a video on compression adjusters. There's some cool stuff we can share, but that'll be for another time. So here's our new piston. Everything is going to stay in there. I'll let you take a look. Inside of there is our high-speed adjuster cup and our spring as well. Again, all that stays in there. The only thing we took out is the piston. This is going to just fit right into the top. And we're going to do the reverse of what I just showed you. I'm going to push down in the center with our tool. And I'm going to work in that circlip into that groove on the outside. This is another one of those things as well that's a little easier with two people or an extra set of hands. But let's see for video demonstrations if I can do this solo. Ooh. Sometimes I impress myself. Not often, but sometimes. All right, so that came out perfect. It's holding it in place. We can check it out now. So as cool as it looks, what's more important is how it's going to perform. The settings we have on here are matched with settings on here. So now you have a comprehensively revalved shock. The last piece of the puzzle we're going to do is, here is our OEM bladder cap. These don't feature a Schrader valve. That is the component. Come on. That we see right here. So when it comes to charging these with gas, there's actually a rubber plug in the center of this hole. I'll show you the back side of it. And in order for us to charge it with gas, we need to pierce it with a hypodermic needle in order to inflate it. And we'll see this needle come out the back side. It's going to push it out, but you get the point. What happens is sometimes these plugs get pushed out, or more commonly, they don't self-seal. So they don't encapsulate all the nitrogen gas as reliably as they should. So at Ride JBI, again, going back to the thing of how less forgiving shocks are, it's really important to have everything in your favor to ensure it works exactly as it is designed and how it should. So we're going to get rid of this cap and its rubber plug and utilize our cap that has a Schrader valve on it, just like you would find on the tube of the tire of your motorcycle. These are much easier to charge with gas, much easier to check how much gas pressure is in there, and they're much more reliable in encapsulating and holding that gas in there also. We have these in color green, and as of recent, we also have these in color black. So this is a relatively new shock. They still have a little bit of what's it called, grease on the inside. So let's just evenly kind of move that around before putting this back on. But oh, it's nice, clean, and dry in there. That's very important. So I'm going to press this a little bit to let it equalize. Again, if you're watching this video, you're probably just checking it out. One, because you already know how to do shocks, so you're interested in how we're doing it. Or two, you don't know how to do shocks, but you're interested in our product. So again, I'm not doing everything step by step, but I'm showing you the highlights of how to install what we are giving you in our kit. So now that we got this there, the last piece of the puzzle is going to be installing our low friction ring. We purchased these from our friends at MX Tech. They make really good products, and they've been good friends of ours and mentors since about 2005. Jeremy Wilkie is an awesome guy. He's been very helpful to me over the years and continues to be, and more important, a good friend as well. So I like to give people credibility when they make really good products, and this is one of the many great products that they make. We're gonna cut off the OEM piston band right here. I find it easier to do assembled. So I got a razor blade in my hand. Be careful, don't cut yourself. I'm gonna work my way down. Beautiful. That's gonna come off. And then we have two O-rings underneath here, which are gonna come off as well. Awesome. Now these rings have a nice little split inside of them. You see it's not perfectly straight. That's to prevent any oil from blowing by. And we're gonna just separate it just enough to get it installed. Beautiful. And then there's always gonna be a small gap because these seals are going to, the O-rings are going to squish when we assemble it, closing that gap. So right now, everything's looking awesome. I'll show you the few next steps we do for us, but we have bleed machines here at the shop. So depending on how you fill the shock with oil is kind of going to vary the next few steps, but I'll kind of walk you through the rest of what we do just to kind of get a little bit more of an idea. But at least for now, you know the exact steps of how to install our JBI suspension DIY kit. So with that in mind, man, let's shift focus to our shock. It's really important to make sure it's clean. When it comes out to cleaning the shock tubes, I like to do it right side up. So that way anything you're cleaning falls out instead of falls into the tube. This shock is pretty new. We're pretty fortunate that we tend to get a lot of newer suspensions, so it tends to be pretty clean and doesn't really require a lot of extra cleaning and scrubbing on our end, which is very nice. It hasn't always been that way, but we've been doing this since 2008. I started this business when I was in college at ASU, and we've definitely earned our time, and I've worked on many old bikes, new bikes, vintage bikes, and we can say it's very appreciative and fun now to mostly be working on newer stuff. And how should we mount this? We're gonna mount this like this in our vise so that you guys can see it. Cool. What should we start with? Let's start with our shock shaft assembly. Kind of give this one more good wipe down. Any dirt or dust or any type of debris you see, it needs to be gone. I can't stress that enough. Shocks perform under a much higher pressure than forks do. That's why their window for mistakes, or let's say they have such a smaller range for mistakes to happen. Because if anything happens, that pressure wants to go elsewhere where it shouldn't be. We love grease here. If you love it, lube it. So we're gonna put a little bit of grease on this band. Sorry, that's a lot bit. And we're also gonna do it on our O-ring as well. We don't wanna get grease in the oil, but if you get a little bit, man, that's not the end of the world, because you should be using a petroleum-based grease. because we're using a petroleum-based oil, and we're using NBR rubber inside of the shock, which is a petroleum-based rubber. So we want all those things to be matching. I know there's some very exotic greases out there, but they don't always play well with other materials. I like to squeeze this bushing a little bit to help it fit in there. Try to do it where the camera's not. Beautiful. And right behind us is going to be our seal head and our setting tool. Now, if I had this vise clamped really tight, it would be hard to push this down because it would be constricting the bore of this, but I don't. Cool. So here's one part that a common mistake happens is we have two circlips for the shock absorber, and sometimes they get switched, and they should never get switched. The one that goes into your seal head is going to be the black circlip with the much bigger gap. Reason being is this circlip's actually smaller in diameter. This is a 50 millimeter bore, and this is a 4 or 55 millimeter bore for this bladder cap. So black circlip goes with the seal head. Excellent. Let's seat it. Beautiful. Now it's time for our bladder install. Now, bladders love to collect dust. I'll show you. This thing's just been sitting out in the shop for maybe like 10 minutes. So please grab a microfiber rag and just give it a nice wipe down. Don't get any ideas. Oh yeah. Oh man, we're gonna have an OnlyFans page after this.
It's big and black.
Indeed. All right. So I'm actually gonna put a small amount of grease here, because I was once told if you love it, lube it. And I'm big on that. Cool. So we got that grease on there. That'll fit right into here. And just push down. And you're gonna feel it seat. You're gonna feel the cap seat against the shock body. It only goes so far. And then next will be our other circlip, which is gonna be our silver one. Excellent. So since we vacuum bleed these, we bleed them through our compression adjuster. So we're not going to put this back in yet, but we can verify our circlip is seated. This is sliding very nice and smooth. We got some grease in there in the meantime before it's filled with oil. That way it's just not dry. We got our bladder fitted in there. Our circlip is fully seated as well. And then the last piece we will have to do is our compression adjuster that has been modified and revalved as well. But that'll be last after we fill this shock up with oil, get it, and then install that, then charge it, and it's ready to go. We will provide you with specifications such as where to put your clickers at, how much spring preload to put on the spring, and also how much nitrogen gas to charge the shock with as well. That'll give you some baseline settings, and it'll also provide you with 4 alternative settings. 2 of those which are stiffer and 2 of those which are softer. So that way with that settings guide, you have a very nice tunable range on how you can make this shock feel and operate depending on the conditions and track that you are riding at. Thank you for checking out this video, guys. I really appreciate it. We've been working really hard on developing these DIY kits for about the past 1.5 years, and the feedback has been very positive. They're a great match to the DIY kit we have for the front forks. And that was really the drive on this, was we felt like the forks were working awesome. The shock revalve settings we had were working quite well, but not quite up to the same level as the forks. So we spent a lot of time figuring out how can we improve this shock to work better. One of the key pieces we found was changing out this piston to the work style piston was something that really helped the shock perform better overall. By that I mean smoother on the small bumps, better bottoming on the big jumps, and ultimately that's what we're always after. It can just be rather challenging and hard to often achieve, especially when you have a bike like the Kawasaki and Showa suspension, which already comes with pretty damn good performing stock settings. So by no means are we saying the stock doesn't perform well. It does. What we're providing are just settings that work even better than stock overall. All JBI suspension services and parts can be found at ridejbi.com.